From Lewis in the Black Horse Pub. I better join you. Yeah, that's a lovely. Was it your son-in-law who bought you that?
My son, the younger of my sons.
Aha.
He's the one with a sense of humour.
Very fitting it is too.
Yeah.
How many sons do you have?
2. Numbers 2 and 3 are my sons. My firstborn is my daughter, my lovely daughter.
Ah. Well, now I've got I've got the other B here, except that his microphone isn't turned on at the moment. There we go. Here it comes. Well, yes, there it is. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, Keith. Morning, Phil. You're on air, apparently.
I am indeed, as indeed are you, sadly.
Yes. Is that because of your flatulence?
Yes. Things are rather buoyant.
How are you doing, Keith?
Not too badly. Suffering from the cold.
Yeah. I think everybody is, aren't they?
I think so, yeah.
Which is...
Oh,
good. Everyone's got one and I haven't got one. That's just not fair, is it?
No, but I think we better get you on, because actually this one occasionally goes into the window of the pub, so that people passing by know that we're on air. And you could put one on your top window.
Do you want people to know that you're on air? I don't know. It doesn't matter for you, Keith.
I don't know. Some would, some wouldn't. So, I expect the two of you have been plotting, and have got a scintillating topic this morning.
We've got a topic, Keith. Yes, exactly. We thought we'd, as my name suggests there, that we talk about, in this very cold weather, games that we enjoyed, not computer games, mind you, not computer games, but games that we enjoy playing indoors. So in those cold winter evenings, what you can do to pass the time, which is in fact of interest to you, and which you don't particularly enjoy. And there are lots of them, of course. So Phil, I'm going to hand over to you, because I think you've got some views on this, haven't you?
Well, I have views on it, as you do, and as Keith will share his. I've never been a great gamer, I'm afraid. I used to enjoy playing Monopoly, which I think is a game you don't like.
So I've just got dogs fighting in the background, but don't worry about it. It's a great indoor game, watching two dogs fighting when they don't hurt each other.
No, as I was saying, I used to enjoy Monopoly, but I think that's a game you don't like.
I don't like Monopoly at all. I find it very, very dull. And my daughters would often, sitting around the very table where I'm sitting at the moment, would make me get the whole bloody game out, and I'd have to set it all up and play it for, and it goes on for hours. And it's all about being sort of ruthless. And many games are like that, but I don't know what's your view on Monopoly, Keith?
Well, I've played it in the past and quite enjoyed it, but the one that I really think that stretching my mind back to my younger days was Cluedo.
Uh-huh.
Oh yes,
spot on.
Yes, my daughters always beat me at Cluedo. I don't know what it is. They're much better at it than I am.
Because they're the ones with the forensic skills. You haven't got any.
I've got no skills in working out who's done what exactly.
No.
Yeah. What did you like about Cluedo, Keith?
Well, the fact that you use logic, but also I suppose we've all wanted to be a detective at some stage in our lives, and particularly since in reading matter, when I was 10 or 11 or 12, I was introduced to sort of fairly sophisticated stuff by reading the crime writer, the lady,
Agatha Christie.
Yes, and I was always very intrigued by Agatha Christie. Not only the crimes, but the characters. And of course, with Colonel Mustard and the other characters that are in Cluedo, it sort of got you involved, and your imagination could run riot.
Yes.
And you could play with the little trinkets.
Yes.
Appeal to the juveniles of us. Yes. So what games do you like then, Richard?
Well,
or did you like?
Well, I was a very big fan of chess when I was younger.
Yes. My grandfather taught me chess.
And I played that quite a bit. I wasn't as good as other people, but I played it quite a bit. As an older person, I have played quite a bit of Go, which is a Chinese-Japanese game, which is far harder to understand, and I think is a great discipline. An incredibly simple game to describe, but is probably 10 times more complex than chess in terms of the way it's played.
Well, explain it to me then, please. It's so simple.
Okay, it's you have a board which is bigger than a chessboard, so it's sort of typically 19 by 19, and you have little stones that don't sit on the squares; they sit on the interstices, the crossovers between the lines. And the idea is that you close off an area, and that area then becomes yours. So you have to sort of fill in around an area, and that typically occurs in a corner, of course. because it's easier to do that than in the middle. And the more squares that you do that to, the better. And you play until somebody has got more than the other person has got. It's incredibly difficult to play. It's very simple to describe. So that's really it. You put put your stones down. You can in fact kill off your opponent's group if they have no breathing space, as it were. If
Sounds very oriental.
Yeah. Or you could split them if they've got an area where there's a gap. You can fill the gap, and that gives them two areas which are then potentially open to hostile attacks. It's
this is very interesting, actually, because as you know, I listen a lot to Radio 3, and at the moment they're doing a feature called Words and Music, and the latest one was called Games.
Right.
And it includes chess. It doesn't include Go, but there is an extraordinary amount of music and poetry and prose written about chess.
Yes.
And its history.
Yes.
And rather like Go sounds, chess was militaristic. Chess's origins.
Utterly.
Yeah. And there was one poem that was read out going back to Japan or China, I think Japan, to medieval times. And it was an analysis of playing chess as you would command an army. And it's all about the weaker people are on the flanks, the strength is in the center, and so on. And I found that fascinating. It's coincidental, but I found it fascinating.
No, there's been a lot written, about, aside from the obvious musical called chess, there's been a lot written about it in a more intellectual way, musically as well.
Well, I can heartily recommend to both of you and the viewer that if you've got BBC Sounds, it's well worth listening to this series, but particularly that one.
Right.
I found it very, very interesting.
And I would heartily recommend Go to anybody who wants a game of it. They can come and play me if they want to.
Yeah, either of you, Martin, are young.
My young, yeah.
Yeah, it's no, it's a fascinating. It's far more complex than chess. In the sense that it's a 19 by 19 board. There are far more possible pieces that can be played. People who play it professionally earn a huge amount of money. And they can recognize when they're, good players will recognize when somebody's winning long before I could ever tell. And I have books on it. I've got a Go board with the pieces. And I'm very much a sort of amateur, but it's a very fascinating game. There is a book by a German writer, and it's called The Glass Bead Game.
Yes, it's by Hermann Hesse.
Hermann Hesse. And he sort of bases the glass bead game in part on Go, on the game Go. It has other aspects to it, obviously. It's I'd strongly recommend anybody to read. Presumably, you've read it, Phil.
As a much younger man, I read a lot of Herman Hesse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've forgotten it all now, but yeah, I did read Herman Hesse.
And he was very much aware of Go when he wrote that, and used it as a basis for a theoretical game that he came up with, which wasn't just about little bits of shell or whatever on a board, but also ideas being put together. And I think it's a wonderful book, The Glass Bead Game. It's probably my second favourite book in the world. I would say that. So, Keith, when you were a kid, what did you play?
Well, the traditional one, drafts, chess. But I was just thinking back on Mahjong, which is quite a complicated game, and I never mastered. But it was a game of the people. Strangely enough, I would wander through the streets of Chinatown in Vancouver, and you would pass sort of mysterious doors with the New China Republic Club on it and things of that sort. And from inside you could hear as the Chinese workers were playing Mahjong. And they played it at such speed that the ivories would click and the massed sound come right out into the street. It was absolutely fascinating. And I was in Hong Kong on one occasion, and I passed I was with some people, and I passed a building, and they said, "Oh, what's that noise?" And I was able to say, "They're playing Mahjong."
Good grief. I have played it, but I can't say I ever got on with it as a game, but there we go.
No, it's a complicated game.
Yes.
The thing is that it always came in a beautifully carved wooden box, and all the pieces were always ivory. Never anything plastic. It was always sort of handmade. It's just a beautiful thing to look at.
And you never won any money at it either?
No. I'm not much of a gambler, actually.
No.
I don't know why, but gambling does not appeal to me. My late wife was much better at gambling than I was. She liked to have a flutter on the races if we went there, but she'd always got a marvelous sense of humour. As we went to Down Royal in Northern Ireland, and she bet on a horse, and we watched the horses come around, and she said, "My horse isn't there." And they always have an ambulance come after the field in Northern Ireland. The ambulance went, and then suddenly my wife's horse appeared, trotting behind the ambulance. And her reaction was to howl with laughter. Yet she had a great ability to laugh at herself, having backed the horse that couldn't even pass the ambulance.
Well, having bloody married you, Keith, she would have to have
that was a real gamble, yes.
Yeah. What about Scrabble?
Yes, I quite like Scrabble, but there was always that bit towards the end where you put together a word and you weren't sure about it, and then the fierce argument when somebody challenged it and you tried to defend it. That's the bit that always occurred, and I didn't like that much at all.
No. You know, you could agree at the start of a game of Scrabble what dictionary you're going to use, can't you?
Yes, you can.
Which is helpful. What about you, Phil, with Scrabble?
Again, I was often asked to join in with a game of Scrabble. Being supposedly a wordsmith, it's a game I should have enjoyed, but I found it rather boring, to be honest, Richard. But I have played it. You know, I mean, I go back as far as silly games like snakes and ladders and stuff like that. Going back into childhood. I mentioned that my maternal grandfather taught me chess, taught me whist and solo, and stuff like that. So onto card games. I mean, I have never gambled, Keith, either. I've been on coach trips with school friends, sports teams, you name it. And there's been games of pontoon and poker going on there and back with, comparatively large sums of money changing hands. But I think your dear wife had the right idea. If you're going to gamble, you need to have a sense of humour and be able to laugh it off.
Yes.
So no, I remember as a child and a growing young man, my family and their friends all had whist drives, which were strangely formal affairs. 4 people to a table, everybody keeping scores. So I remember those quite well. I used to enjoy playing solo whist. Again, that's something I've really forgotten how to do. So there we are. I can't remember. Well, whenever we go to our friends across the road, they are great games people. So every Christmas at least they invite us over, and we end up playing some sort of game. It's not necessarily a formal game like on a table, and it's not as daft as charades. It's all based on quizzes and questions. So that brings me on to the inevitable what I did used to enjoy, which was Trivial Pursuit. I used to enjoy that a lot. And just quizzes in general, which you will relate to, Richard, because you're an excellent quiz master.
No, I do enjoy quizzes. You're absolutely right. But you're very
good at concocting the questions too, Richard.
Thank you. You're very
For
kind.
example, the quiz you set, the answers to which the first letter added up to Mirador TV.
Yes.
That was rather clever.
That was a lot of fun. I have to say. And as you know, Philip, I do enjoy writing something that looks formal, but in fact ends up with the first letter of every line, if you read it down the page as opposed to across the page, says something different.
Yes, I've been the victim of one of those in the past. You may remember.
I do remember, and it gave me a great deal of pleasure to produce it. So, Keith, I wrote a reference for Phil, which looked and sounded perfectly reasonable. But if you took the first letter of every line, it said something rather different. I'm not going to say what it said, but it was...
it said that I was constantly inebriated, Richard.
Yeah, I didn't use the word inebriated, as I recall.
No, you didn't.
It made me laugh a great deal, that, Phil.
Yes, I know you laugh at your victims. You are a very cruel type.
Oh, of course I'm a cruel type. That's and that's
Have you been well enough to do your family quiz lately?
Yeah. Every week the family get a quiz of things about the week. In fact, one of the questions that we had was about this chap who won the International Chinese Chess Competition, which is it's not chess, It's not Go, it's Chinese chess, which is a different game. And he went and stayed in a hotel where it was being held. And he got himself utterly Phil Meredith after he'd won, if I can put it that way.
Well, you have.
And he then disgraced himself in the bath and had his title taken from him, and he's been banned from playing again.
Oh, God.
Because he got utterly drunk. So it's what they call it in China. They say, "Oh, look, he's gone all Phil Meredith."
No, Phil Meredith.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wasn't going to say that.
Benny Hill.
Yes, that's why I wasn't going to say it. Now,
before we move on, I had the pleasure, the privilege of having a meal with Richard's family, and this issue of the quizzes came up, and his daughters all were obviously really thrilled with the fact that he comes up with these things each weekend. It is something that all the family enjoy, and so I can attest to the success of that particular indoor sport.
Well, if they didn't enjoy it, and the wider family, they wouldn't partake, would they?
I don't know.
But
Perhaps he's an authoritarian at home.
They're all bloody competitive. That's the thing. They all want to win. There's no question about that.
So they all take after Becky.
Oh no, seriously. And I have a sort of set format because my eldest brother-in-law he's not Welsh, but he was born in Wales because my father-in-law was in the army there at the time when he was born. There's always a question about Ringmer. There's always a question of something that I've heard on the radio. And there's always a question of what could possibly go wrong. So 10 questions, including those. And the Ringmer question, because it involves my parents-in-law, is a multi-guess question with various options, one of which involves pissed old people. And I find it difficult to read that bit out without just laughing to myself.
Are you suggesting that Doug partakes?
Oh, of course he does. And the mother-in-law does as well. So
I'm very glad to hear it.
No. They, they're not to excess, but they take it in good part. So that's okay. When we do that.
Now, where you want to do it yourself games, I'm thinking particularly of Conkers.
Yeah, I always used to just hurt my bloody knuckles playing Conkers, I have to say. And people would cheat, of course. They dip them in vinegar, or they roast them a bit, that sort of thing. So it's I haven't played Conkers for years. Maybe we could have a Conkers. Maybe Mirador could have a Conkers competition.
Well, what a good idea. Yeah.
But that would have to come around in the autumn, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you play Conkers?
Sorry?
I'm just asking if
that is that one of the joys of when I was a small boy was autumn was autumn, and the conkers fell and the leaves fell, and you were warned not to scuff your new shoes by scuffing them through the leaves and so on. And it was one of the great pleasures of a young boy with a nice frosty day, your nose tingling, and pushing your feet through the leaves, and then picking up a conker and deciding that was worth taking home and putting on a piece of string. Lovely memories, I think.
Did you play conkers, Phil?
Yes, Richard, could I just say that the reception in your kitchen is nothing like as good as when you are in your upper room.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry, but it happened last time we were on, a bit like when my reception was rubbish before I got the Wi-Fi changed. So you froze on me there. Did you ask me if I used to do conkers?
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. And I used to cheat. We used to have, soak them in vinegar, that sort of stuff. I never baked them, but soak them in vinegar. And my knuckles were bruised for ages. But I think I started wearing gloves. So yes, but that was hardly an indoor game in the cold nights. My memory is that we played conkers outdoors.
Yes, mostly you're right, but I do recall that it would be played indoors at school.
Yes, well, I don't think at my seniors, mind you, I've probably grown out of it by then. I don't think they were allowed at the grammar school. But I think I remember playing conkers at the primary school. Yeah.
Now, I've got a question for you, which is, where does the name Subbuteo come from, which is that tabletop football game?
Yes.
I know the answer to this, but I've forgotten it. I read about it only a couple of weeks ago. The origins. Is it something South American?
No.
Keith? No, I'm the wrong.
No, I don't know the origin of it.
Subbuteo is part of the name of a group of birds of prey, of which one is called the hobby. So Subbuteo is a hobby. Now, I think that's quite clever on part of the people who came up with. And I played Subbuteo when I was a kid. Had a little set. Used to set it down on the living room floor and flick the players and that sort of thing.
Yes.
It's odd to think about it now because children have all this stuff on computers that they do. And I do wonder whether it's whether they're missing out or whether I missed out at the time when I was doing things that were more obviously physical than they do now, where they...
I don't think you've missed out. We didn't miss out. It's more tactile. It's too remote just to have it on a screen.
I'm not intrigued by computer games at all.
No.
I just have. I suppose I've tried them once or twice, but it doesn't appeal to me. I'd much rather play Subbuteo or chess or whatever. This whole idea of and not least of which is most computer games seem to be violent.
That's my impression. It is an obscenely huge industry. You've only got to access the Apple Store on a computer just the Apple Store to download an app, and it's all games. And then you've got serious competitions, gaming competitions. You've got serials like Game of Thrones, which is arguably the biggest non-television or film serial ever made. It's just extraordinarily popular. No, it's a monstrously big industry.
Do you think youngsters lose out because they're behind their screen as opposed to with their friends?
I coughed in the middle of that, so I missed the whole question, Richard. I'm sorry. Could you repeat it?
Not at all. Do you think youngsters nowadays are missing out on something important in the sense that they're in their room? They might be having some remote contact with other people. They don't know who they are, as opposed to being together and having a game of Monopoly or whatever it might be.
They're missing out hugely.
Yeah, that's my view, I've got to say.
They're missing out hugely. Oliver, my youngest, doesn't play them much or at all because he's very into interperson contact and whatever. Whereas Charlie, the older, he does loads of these games and it's all remote.
Yeah.
It's all remote. You only know your opponent or opponents by their gaming nickname. No, it's very strange. It reminds me of the day, slightly tangential comment, but we all know the Brewers Arms and the back bar. And I remember in the days when I was a regular in there, one lunchtime, 4, shall we say, Far Eastern students came in. I don't know which country they were from, but they were Far Eastern. And they sat at one of them went to the bar and ordered what everybody else wanted, reading from his phone. He went to rejoin the other 3. And during the entire time I was there, none of them spoke. They were contacting each other by text, messaging each other by text or WhatsApp when the person was sitting next to them or across from them, because they were responding to each other visually but not verbally. I find it quite extraordinary.
They were probably just being rude about you, Phil, and they didn't say it out loud.
Well, that's not a bad observation, actually, by your standards, Richard. That's probably
Thank
right.
You. Yeah. Whereas, I remember when I was a young teenager, I was into wargaming in quite a big way, Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. And I had the advantage of a very good friend of mine who's now, oddly enough, a GP in Sussex. And he lived in the vicarage because his father was the vicar, hence why. And we were around there, for a weekend or however long it took, and we would play long-term games of not just war games, but other tactical games that you could buy. And it would take 3 or 4 days. We'd all go home, obviously, at night. But it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, just to sort of be there, interacting with each other, and being able to negotiate with each other, which was often an important part of these games. And I look back on that with a great deal of fondness, I have to say. because
Yes,
it was.
that's obvious, and I can understand that. It is the opposite of what these youngsters, or not so youngsters, do alone in front of their computer screens.
Yeah.
An indoor game that I loved as a student, and it was taken very seriously at Collingwood College, was table football.
All right.
Absolutely deadly serious stuff.
Yes.
Because there is actually quite a bit of skill
Oh yes.
in the old table football. And we spent hours playing table football in the common room, hours. It was also the time when Pac-Man came in. So you'd have like an arcade machine, and it was the original version of Pac-Man, where was it Pac-Man or was it Star Wars? It was the one where you basically had to shoot like with a laser, using a lever and everything. These
That's
sort of
not Pac-Man.
invading, advancing blocks. Very simple, but this was what, 1974-5? You know, all pretty basic stuff. But table football was great. That was good.
Oh, table football is a joy to play. There's no question about that.
It's years since I've played it. I don't know. Is there a pub in Lewes that still has a table football machine?
Don't think so.
I can't remember one. Obviously, there's the pool table in the Brewers.
Yeah. Well, there are several places have pool tables, but
They nearly all have a Toad set, whatever you call that thing.
Toad table, yeah. Keith,
Yeah.
you I may have told you already that I'm the only person who's ever been banned from playing Toad.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
The mind
quite rightly so.
I was deemed too obnoxious. And I'm not saying they're wrong about that.
Yes. You used the verbals, did you?
A little bit, yes. But by that time, my team had already won the World Championship held in the town hall, so I felt able to resign without needing to appeal against it, because, you know, my work here is done, sort of thing. I do like a game of Toad, though, and it's a shame to miss it, but there we go. There we go.
My younger grandson is heavily into the war games thing. He takes the little figures and paints them and so on.
Yeah.
But we had a friend. I say had because she was 96 when my grandsons were introduced to her, and she kept Ludo and dominoes and snakes and ladders. And on a Sunday morning, we would go over there, and while I and my wife sipped gin and tonic, she would play Ludo and Snakes and Ladders with them, and they were thrilled by it. And
Yes.
it was sort of, you know, 5 or 6 year old boy or boys with a 96-year-old lady who. It was the spryest lady I ever came across, but it was fascinating, and they loved it. They loved it.
Whilst you were quaffing it back in the corner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Scoundrel.
Yes. Just as an aside, this lady, they lived on South Street. Her I think it was her stepfather built the GLC building, the other side of the Thames. And when the Japanese bought it, there is a plaque in there honouring her father as the architect who built this thing. and she was. I mean, she was going to be in her 80s then. She was terrified that the Japanese were going to pull this plaque down. So she got her umbrella, got onto the train, said nothing to anybody, went up to National Heritage, battered them over the head, insisted they went down there with her, and made sure that plaque was saved for posterity.
She sounds like she was a real force of nature.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the gin and tonic that we had on a Sunday morning there was known as a heather in the city, because you would go in and she would say, "Gin and tonic, dear." "Yes, please, Heather." And she'd go, "Glug, glug, 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 tonic."
Now, you mentioning the GLC building has triggered a memory in me, because in my first set of chambers on Temple Avenue, we had a member of chambers who was a GLC councillor for Hornchurch, and he would take us down at least once a week to the GLC, and we would buy for a heavily subsidised small amount, like £3, a huge lunch, because it was all subsidised. And this huge dining room, packed with all these councillors and guests, they were good times, I have to say. Didn't do much for the afternoons, but it was very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice building, actually.
Yeah. Well, my love of oysters grew out of going into the RCAF mess on Sea Island at Vancouver Airport, and they had what was known as a beer call on a Friday, and you got a beer for a nickel. And they always put on a huge amount of food, chicken legs and so on, but often a whole mountain of oysters. And that's where I gathered my love of oysters. Beer is a nickel. That's 5 pence or 5 cents.
So a Royal Canadian Air Force happy hour.
Yes.
I'm sure you were very happy.
I was.
No, Horace Cutler was the chap in charge of the GLC in those days. Rather controversial figure. I also remember meeting Ken Livingstone there. I was introduced to him by Alan, whose surname I forget, my colleague. And he was absolutely charming. I couldn't fault him. Really welcoming, chatty guy, very ordinary, very down to earth. Red Ken, as the book described him.
Yes.
Sorry,
go ahead, Richard.
No, you go ahead, Keith.
No, I was just going to say that I think I met him once, but at a distance. I mean, I wasn't at a distance, but there were several other people there. I never sort of conversed with him personally.
Well, I was fortunate to do that in the sense that Alan made a point of introducing me to him because I'd spotted him in the dining hall. And yeah, he was very personable, you know, and a man true to his beliefs, to his credit.
And suffered as a consequence of that in many ways.
Yes, I'm afraid he did, which is condemnatory of the system, not him.
No, completely. It reflects more on politics than it does on him personally.
Yeah, entirely so, Richard. Yeah. You mentioning Ludo, Keith, I think I do have a memory of playing Ludo, but a rather vague one. Shove Halfpenny, These are
Yeah,
these are pub games, aren't they?
Yes.
I actually still have a Shove Halfpenny board.
Oh, do you? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Which is quite nice to play once in a while. But I have to put my flat cap on and have a weasel down the trousers, so I've got to make out I'm a northerner when I'm
You
playing.
mean a ferret? They don't have weasels in Yorkshire. They have ferrets.
Ferrets, that's the ones. And I have to go up when I get one between the lines. Yeah. So that's.
Can I just tell you, because you're often on about one man and his dog. There is a lady, Carol Sanders, is somewhere in the United States, who regularly sends in little notes. And if you don't think that anybody is ever watching, she says, and this is all the way from the States, Trivial Pursuit is the only one of the games you've mentioned that my siblings would play occasionally in childhood.
Good grief. Right.
So somebody, and it's a lady, is currently watching us in the United States.
That's right.
Bloody hell.
And what time must it be there for that lady?
Well, it's anything from, actually, Melissa is standing by to come on at 10:30, and it's 5 o'clock in New York.
5 p.m.
5 a.m.
0500, Christ.
They're behind us. Yeah. I love Trivial Pursuit. Not many people choose to play it with me, I have to confess, but there we go.
Well, both now sadly dead friends in Arundel, Ian Robertson, who was a parasolicitor, paralegal in South London, but also Ian Anders, the actor, in Taggart. He played Chief Inspector McVitie. He and his wife were incredibly serious Trivial Pursuit players. You weren't there for a laugh. No. They were deadly serious. But there are games that do grab you like that.
Well, I've my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and in Ireland, she's better than him. She effectively plays bridge for Ireland.
Yes, well, now bridge is for me. Bridge is a bridge too far. It's beyond me.
And she's
tried.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law, Stella, was an excellent bridge player. I had a chap in my second set of chambers called Graham Cook, who had been an actuary, and he was a Great Britain reserve bridge player. He was that good. So I have rubbed shoulders with some very good bridge players. And when I used to commute on the old-fashioned trains with the buffet cars, all those years ago, for all those times, there was always a 4-seat compartment in the buffet car that was jealously guarded by those who got on first, because those 4, by the time it got to Horsham, and there was a well-known Silk who got on at Horsham to make up the 4, and they ran a bridge school. Because I once had the temerity of trying to sit down in a vacant seat, and the chap very politely said to me, "Would you mind, because we're starting a school of 4 at Horsham." And I didn't have the heart or the rudeness to take the seats, but there we are. Because I'm just a nice guy, Richard.
Well, now, I have to say that the bridge is something that I avoid like the plague, And the reason being is I recognize what a challenging game it is, but it becomes obsessive.
Oh yes.
And people will stop doing whatever they're doing and sit down and have a game of bridge in the middle of a serious conversation. So I refuse to get hooked.
No, I had a contemporary at university who became obsessed with bridge, and he was a brilliant mathematician, but he ended up not getting the degree he should have got. And the reason was that he just played bridge all the time.
Yeah.
And it did become an obsession for him, I regret to say.
It can, and I think that's very. It's something that is. Sorry, I'm just trying to fix a Wi-Fi because we lost it for a moment.
Okay. No, but it can be a problem when somebody becomes obsessed with it, and this chap ended up playing for the university at bridge and all that sort of thing. He had a brilliant mind. There's no question about it at all, but didn't achieve what he could have done in his degree simply because bridge. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't anything else. It was simply bridge. Took over his every waking hour, which I find a little bit odd. And he wasn't betting on it for money or anything like that. It was just playing the game and winning it that he was interested in, and using his fantastic mathematical brain to work out which cards were left and where they might be. And as a consequence, I think he might have ended up getting a 2-1, but I think it was probably a 2-2, when in fact he was first material, no question at all, in maths. But
well, the reason I came out of Durham with only a 2-2 was I was obsessed with running the college bar.
That's not a sport or an indoor game. That's just running a bar.
Yes, well, I meant that rather tongue in cheek.
I know you did, Bill.
It did become rather obsessive, I have to say. But there we are.
Yes. Whereas I in my finals year, I became obsessed with getting my degree. I have to say that my third year was. I wasn't the most interesting of individuals. Not sure.
Nothing's changed then.
Nothing's changed. But unlike other, I remember there was a chap who did theology in my year, and he was clearly somebody who took drugs and that sort of thing. There's no question about it. And I saw him after one of his exams. I said, "Well, how did that go then, John?" He said, I wrote it straight from my subconscious." And I thought, that's not gonna bode well for your degree, is it, John? Let's be
Oh, that's priceless.
Yeah, no, he just said, I write it straight from my subconscious. Okay. Yeah.
Dear, oh dear.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're coming up to the hour mark, Mr. Keith.
Yes, we are. And as I've already invited Mark Mabey, Professor Mabey, to come in. When we're tight like this, I tend not to take a break because I have to go through the process of putting us up on the air again, and that causes all sorts of problems. But I also quite like it when just for a couple of minutes our correspondents meet one another because it's the only time that they do. John Henty was on yesterday, who is a very ebullient character, and he was saying the reaction that he gets from the people that he knows is what a useful service we are now beginning to provide to the community, because we go through such a variety of topics on Mirador with such a variety of people, and it's getting people excited. So there you are. If you needed a little bit of a boost on what you do, it's being valued socially.
Well, I find it an incredible thought that people watching Richard and me get excited. I find that very hard to believe.
Well, you know, the thing with you two is that you never know what the hell you're going to talk about. I least of all.
Nor do we. Nor do we.
Yeah.
So we shall see each other on Friday, shall we?
Yes.
On Friday? Today is Friday.
Monday.
Monday, yes, indeed. We'll see one another on Monday morning, and I should look forward to it.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay, and Richard, you go well.
And you, mate. Take care. Might see you down the place later.
Okay. That'd be great if that was the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Toodles.
I think Philip's gone.
There we go. Right. The two Bs, we never know what we're going to talk about, and we sort of meander a little, and oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, the USB is not working again, and why that happens, I have no idea at all, and. Never mind. We won't worry too much. It's behaved itself so far. Coming up, hopefully, is Mark Maybe, who was in London on Wednesday and couldn't make it to see us. I hope that he's coming on today. He's been given the link, as we say, to get on side, and Carol Saunders in the States. Thank you for being with us. And she was asking whether Richard's dog was a pug or a bulldog. So there we are. We are international all the time, and Behar Zogiani, who is from Kosovo, is tuned in. Good morning, Behar. Behar Zogiani, who is he's Mr. Kosovo, really, and a journalist of some considerable note. And for those of you who may have read my book on business journalism, is Behar has a little yes bit at the end in which he describes how he was beaten by the Serb police and what it's like to be beaten like that. His memorable phrase is, they beat me until I didn't feel it anymore. Is a giant amongst journalists, Behar, and he kept going, and he's a mentor to younger journalists now. A fantastic character. So well done, Behar, and I hope that you're well and your family as well, and everything is hunky dory. Right. Okay. I don't see Mark coming up yet, but then again, sometimes it takes a little while to. It takes a little while to come through. Well, such is life. Such is life. Sometimes it's difficult to I'm just pausing for a little bit. I'm just trying to see whether Mark was saying he's having difficulty getting through, but I don't see that he is. So we'll. I think perhaps what we'll do is I will send him another invitation, and we'll. Otherwise, I'm going to be flanneling for a little while. And to Carol Sanders, way up in the United States, and to Behar Zoghani, I'll say to you, keep joining us, and toodle pip.